In today's video, we're going to be diving into the upcoming pattern. It's getting a little bit more interesting now. We do see the lake effect snowfall continuing for days and also very cold air, but we are going to reach a crossroads at some point after about the 10th of December. A lot of these models showing more warmth working its way into the east, in particular the southeast, and the question really is, how long will this last? Will we see the first 10 days be cold and then the final, 20 days be a little bit warmer, or will we see a brief warm up followed by more cold air? And I think that we're going to have that question in the back of our heads for a few days here at least, but we're going to try to answer some of those questions and show you guys what's upcoming. There is a few interesting storms within there, as well as these big temperature changes typically bring bigger storms. So we're going to see more rainfall, snowfall in spots, and maybe even some ice storms as well in there. So let's dive into things. And obviously right now we've been predicting this for weeks, and it is here. It's been here for a few days, but we have this warmth out west, this huge positive PNA bubble that is basically forcing the cold air to move into the east for the most part here. Very interesting. We've been under this again for a few days now already. We had another very similar cool down about a week ago or a little bit more. And overall, the past 10, 15 days have been cooler, and we're only getting colder. We continue to see this really, devastating lake effect snowfall. There's no other way to put it. Just continued feet of snowfall piling onto these areas is just nothing short of amazing and very impactful. So we're seeing this major event that we have been also calling for like a week plus, sure enough, coming true here. We do see a little bit of a clipper system up here, and we are going to see a couple of these actually throughout this model run moving down and actually impacting these areas that certainly don't need any more snowfall, the Great Lakes as well. So let's see what happens as we move towards tomorrow on Monday, December 2nd, and this one in particular dives southward, so it actually doesn't hit the Great Lakes area where we're going to see some of these do this, but we do see this moves down into like the lower Midwest, like Missouri and Illinois, seeing some snowfall, very light and short-lived, but still some snowfall nevertheless. Here comes this Great Lakes one as we reach Tuesday the 3rd here, still very cold over the east. For Wednesday, we are seeing continued cold temperatures, a little less cold on this day, but we are seeing now synoptic snowfall mixing in with the lake effect snowfall as we have a major low overhead of the Great Lakes here. Synoptic snowfall just meaning it's coming from a low pressure system and not that lake effect snowfall, so a little bit of an actual snowstorm moving in. And as we move through the next few hours after this, we do see the mid-Atlantic and Northeast cash in on some snowfall, pretty heavy there for portions of New England at times. And even as we move towards Thursday on December 5th, it's very cold with continued lake effect snowfall, that low in between Maine and Canada, bringing some snowfall up for New England. As we move towards Friday, we see our next clipper system moving down. It's just to the north of the Great Lakes there, as you can see. Also notice we have some moisture down here by the Gulf states, some rainfall going on for a lot of states down there. Even some precipitation, which has been hard to come by the way, for this area for a while. But for the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, seeing some rainfall here on Friday the 6th. As we head over the next few hours, this is by the time we're looking at 4 a.m. on Saturday the 7th, and we see this snowfall mixing in for portions of Michigan. I shouldn't say mixing in because it's actually just pure snowfall, but it's starting to move in with this strong low that's near the southern Hudson Bay. We're going to see the cold rebound a little bit here at this point. Some snowfall for the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic again. The cold is moving back down. Then we get this really, really impactful just line of snowfall kind of moving southward here, bringing snowfall to states like the kind of more central plains like Nebraska and Kansas, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois here, Michigan, and even as far east as Pennsylvania and New York there, seeing some of this. And by the time we reach the high temperatures of Monday, things get interesting. We start to get a coastal low starting out for Florida, and if we have cold in place for this one, so let's say it's a little bit cooler for these areas than this model is showing, which we still have 200 hours. There can be some change. This would be kind of hard to get here, but we would be looking at a pretty massive threat for snowfall in this northeast corner of the nation. But it does look a little bit warmer, and it's been trending that way, and it doesn't even really bring too much in the way of snowfall for those more southern and coastal areas. And really, we start out as snow The problem here is that our primary low is over Kentucky and Tennessee. So we have this warm front here and then a secondary low. That warm front is pushing warm temperatures up the East Coast here behind it. So we almost start out as snowfall, move into sleet, ice, and then eventually pure rainfall. So it's going to be hard to get accumulating snowfall in that type of situation because even if it does accumulate, you're getting rainfall after. It's probably going to melt away. But if we see these models trend in another direction, like this low basically being the primary one and maybe even the sole low, we would be seeing pure snowfall for a lot of areas in here, as opposed to this messy mixed bag storm that we're seeing the models kind of put out. So very interesting. Becomes a pretty massive ice storm up there in the Northeast before switching over to full snow for states like New York and northern New England, areas that have already seen quite a bit. Now, as we move towards Friday the 13th, we do see another major low over south central Canada. This has been a trend here. Also, some snowfall starting out for the Cascades and Rockies here, which, again, we haven't seen for a while here on these models. So, very interesting to see that. But we don't have enough cold air. I think the problem here is that we're starting to get cold air mixing for the Northwest, North Central, and the Northeast. So we have this very, very wide trough, and it's not digging super far south. So this storm kind of gets rejected and moves back to the north here, as you can see over the Hudson Bay. If we get a little bit more warmth pushing up the west coast here, you would probably see this storm dive further southward and more cold, and somewhere in here would be getting snowfall. But we just don't see that happen on the models right now. And we continue to see that kind of rejection in the east look after this point, and even to the extent that by Tuesday the 17th, this is the look, a full-blown trough in the west, so a negative PNA, and then warmth here. Now, I shouldn't say warmth, but normal conditions returning to the east, where we have this ridge set up for the southeast, Ohio Valley, Great Lakes, some of the more Gulf states here, obviously dealing with some warmth down there, and we get this cold really pouring into the west, and, you know, these things can't last forever, so to see this cold pattern come to an end after the 10th, probably closer to the 15th, would be 15, 16, 17 days of cold, which is a very long-term cool down, by the way. The question remains is, do we see this kind of continue to cycle this way, or do we get a low developing up here with a cold front that pulls the cold air back into the east and warm air pushed back in for the west? Because that's what we've been seeing a lot when these warm-ups move into the east. They're very brief, but we might get a long-term one at some point. And again, this is why we're at a crossroads today. We really don't know what's going to happen after this point, and this is a critical point. So tomorrow's video is going to be very exciting. So is the next one, and we're going to know a lot more every single day. Let's take a look at the Euro real quick, the European model, and we get very similar look here. Lake effect snowfall continuing, colder air, low moving over the Great Lakes and into the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast with some snowfall. Then we start to get a little milder after the 10th here. We get a more major cool down on the European model here than we see on the GFS, but this 9th storm, look at where it's located. We kind of get one near the Great Lakes with a strong cold front here, warm front look up to the north. We don't get this secondary low. That's non-existent here on the European model. And along this cold front, wouldn't be surprised if we see some severe weather possibilities here for the deep south states underneath this very strong low. We do have very warm and humid conditions moving in, and we have very cold air moving in from behind, cold and dry air, and that's going to create a lot of conflict in here, and I could see severe weather sparking up within that. We do see we get a major cool down after this, as you can see, for the east moving in for at least the, you know, kind of 10th, 11th, 12th time frame there before we lift off again. We get another trough around the 14th, 15th, and then we get right into this kind of more ridge-like pattern. I will say that the look here is that this cold is meeting a lot more kind of conflict here in the west. We see the warmth really pushing back. There's definitely some, it's going against the grain here. We have the warmth pushing equally with the cold, whereas the GFS look, if we look back at it, I mean, that cold just fully moves in. The European model has a much more contested look, and this may be a sign that that warmth might make a comeback and this cold might move into the east. Again, the keyword here is might, and I'm trying to see it both ways, but that's all we can really do. It's a 50-50 shot, but we do have the models giving an opportunity for warmth to move into the east, and that could spell a big flip, or it might be a minor roadblock in the way of this overall colder pattern, and I'm very curious to see what ends up happening. It is a little bit exciting. I've gotten a little bit, you know, I love cold and snow, but it's getting a little repetitive Just, every single day, like, hey, there's cold and snow coming, every single day, nothing changes. So it is interesting to see some more stuff that we could talk about here. I guess I'm excited about that. The total precipitation does look to be on the rise for the east still. So more is expected here. And also for the kind of northern Rockies and Cascades, we've seen a big time increase as well. The anomalies still show below average for the west, but they are kind of improving. The northern Rockies and northern Plains, though, do see an above average amount, as well as especially these deeper south areas up through the Great Lakes and some of the mid-Atlantic and northeast even. East Coast, still a ways to go, but it has improved. The browns and the greens don't mean everything. As long as you're seeing some precipitation, it's kind of an improvement from what we've seen at times. Now, total snowfall in the GFS model, there will be opportunities for the Cascades and Northern Rockies, much more than we've seen the models outputting. And then also for a lot of these areas here, across the Northern Plains, Upper Midwest, even some of the Lower Midwest into the Great Lakes, and then Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, we will see a lot, especially along the lakes, but there is opportunities for snowfall in there outside of the lakes. And the European model, it says not so much for down here. We don't see quite as much outside of the lakes and then the upper Midwest and northern plains here. We do see some for the mid-Atlantic and northeast, though. That is kind of the hot spot here. We do see equally an increase across the mountainous west, though, just like the GFS model showed, which is interesting. Good to see agreement. Now, colder air is still expected to continue for a while here. I mean, we're at the 1st today, so happy December, everybody. We see this continued cold overall for the east, at least through the 8th, with this brief warm up here, followed by more cold air able to move its way in. And then again for the 14th here, we're seeing continued warmth in the east that lasts a couple of days here. So look at the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th. This is a pretty strong southeast ridge on the GFS model, as we've noted, whereas the cold air is able to fully infiltrate the west, bringing about a negative PNA. So this definitely encourages warmth in the east. The European model, we're going to see a little bit of disagreement here at the end, so let's just skip to it. We do see more continued cold, I would say, past the 10th than the GFS model. But look at this look at the end. This is the 16th. I'm going to move us back to the 16th here just to get a equal look here. Actually, we got to move back 1 hour here. But you'll notice that there is a pretty big difference here, especially in the placement of the warmth. The GFS model, we see that there is cold temperatures infiltrating most of the west here. The warmth, I would say the heart of it would be here and even, a lot of the southeast as well. But when we look at the European model's temperature chart here, I would say the warmth, the heart of it is still centered over the central states with some over the southwest, some here over the deeper south. That's a little bit more west-based, and we still have cold along the eastern seaboard on this model, and it looks like this cold might still want to slide over, although some of it is making its way down the southwest. It's going to be interesting to see if the warmth or the cold wins out in the west, because whatever happens out west is going to be the opposite in the east. It's a big time factor here. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to subscribe. We do upload every single day. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it, leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.